kingdom in a mixed up world. You're in the sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. You're in the sweet spot, baby. You're in the sweet spot, girl. You're in the sweet spot, darling. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world. It's a magical kingdom in a mixed up world.
Welcome to the Sweep Spot Podcast. My name is Lynn, your host, and Ken's my co-host. Ken, how's it going?
Oh, Lynn, it is going. It is going. I am so happy to be here for this episode of the Sweep Spot Podcast.
This is episode 385.
385. That's hard to believe. That's impressive, Lynn. Good going.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
In case you're wondering who we are, we're both former Disneyland custodial cast members, and we talk Disneyland, and we host the #1 Disneyland podcast, hosted by two former Disneyland custodians.
Number one.
We are also authors of the books Cleaning the Kingdom. We have 2 different volumes out. You can get the second volume paperback on our website, thesweepspot.com, or you can get both. Well, so the second one's on our website, and that one's signed by both of us while supplies last. And we'll probably get some more back in, probably in August sometime. And then we have both books on Amazon. You can get both of those not signed on Amazon in paperback. You can also find our books wherever digital copies are found, like Kindle, Apple Books. And we have both books on Audible, audio, on Audible. We have both.
Easy
books,
for you to say.
Yeah, both books on audio at audible.com and wherever audiobooks are found. So you can get those there. And also, we have a Patreon. If you'd like to join our Patreon, there are more and more perks. You may have heard that we have some ads within our show, and we kind of explained a little bit about it last episode, so I don't need to go into it any further. But if you want ad-free listening, you can join our Patreon, and you can. So what I'm going to do with that one, because I was trying to decide what to do, I wanted to give it ad-free versions to all the Patreons, and I thought, well, would that include the people that get the bonus episodes and the current events live access? And what I thought today, I was thinking about it, I thought, why don't we just give the ad-free to everyone that is a Patreon? Doesn't matter if you give $1 or $20 or whatever. You can have the ad-free one, but you don't get, obviously you have to give $5 or more per month to get the current events access when we record those live, and also the bonus episode that we record once a month. Speaking of that, that will come out, had come out. That just came out. So you want to listen to that. So anyways, to join that, you can go to patreon.com and search the Sweep Spot, or go to thesweepspot.com and look for the Patreon link. And like I said, for $5 or more a month, you can get those great perks and also the ad-free versions too of our show. We are also going to be at the D23, the Ultimate Fan Experience. Is that right? Yeah, D23. And we will be there all 3 days. And as it gets closer, probably within a month or so before it happens, maybe 2 months before, we're going to have the times of when we're going to be at Laughing Place's booth during this event. Otherwise, we'll just be kind of around, but we will have at least a few hours each day where we will be at the booth selling both of our books. We'll be able to sign them, and I'll probably have some buttons to hand out to our listeners. So if you're going, look forward to that. I think that's all I have for this. Ken, who's our guest tonight?
Well, we're going to pretty much just kind of interview each other because we wanted to kind of explain who we are and why we're here.
Who are these guys?
Yeah. For people who don't know, I mean, if you bought the books and read through them, you have a better idea of that. If you've been listening a really long time, you've picked up on things here and there. But we kind of want to explain what we're doing and why, and just, our backgrounds and things like that for some of our newer listeners, because we are trying to get newer listeners. And even if you've been listening to us for a while, you'll probably hear things you haven't heard before.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, and we'll especially if you wonder, Lynn mentioned the Patreon thing with the bonus episodes.
Mm-hmm.
We usually talk more informally and personally during those. Those are about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but you'll get kind of a flavor of what those are like.
Well, before we get into that, I have a few messages. Looking to go to Disneyland Resort in California, Walt Disney World Resort in Florida, Aulani in Hawaii, or on a Disney cruise, or Adventures by Disney Vacation, I am here to help you book the best vacation possible, and my expertise and services won't cost you anything extra. Disney pays me, not you. As a perk by booking a package with me, I can also book your dining reservations, park reservations, tours, shuttles, and more. Let me do the hard work while you get excited about your upcoming Disney vacation. I can also book Universal Studios trips as well. Contact me at Barron, that's LBARRON at concierge.com. That's CONCIEARS.com, or the sweepspot at gmail.com. So on this episode, we're going to do something a little bit different, and we thought we would do something where you get to know your hosts. And it's been a while since we've kind of talked about us. It's been a while since we talked about us. No, it's been a while. It's been a while since.
I want to talk about me.
Yeah. We always have guests on, and we haven't really had a lot of episodes where we talk about our experiences, and we've kind of put some of those stories within all the episodes up to this point and in our books. But I thought we'd do something just kind of a refresher, and for some of the new listeners, just kind of know who we are a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit about some of our experiences and how we how the podcast became and the books and everything. So Ken, I'll let you start off first.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have a feeling this is going to feel a little bit like our bonus episodes that our Patreon supporters get, but which is more personal. But yeah, I mean, we just assume people know who we are and why they should listen and all that sort of thing. And if you are a fan of Disneyland, past or present, this is the podcast for you. Because that's what we talk about. We talk about the past, the present, and the future of the Disneyland Resort. But we're both Southern California guys in terms of our background. I grew up about, if there's no traffic, about 45 minutes from Disneyland. Of course, in later years, there was always traffic. And go maybe about once a year or so growing up. And that was, 1970s, 1980s. And then I just realized this is the kind of stuff we talk about when we're guests on other people's podcasts. But, it's, our own listeners should hear this stuff. Back in 1985, after a family vacation, my parents thought, okay, we've got a little money left over. So let's splurge and get Disneyland annual passes. Back then they were like $100 a piece. Okay. $100 a piece. They got you parking, right, and they got you entry to the park during regular operating hours, which as of 1985 was 365 days per year. No other perks, no monthly payments, no discounts, no special parties, stuff like that. I think it also got you a publicity, newsletter like quarterly or something like that. Um, and it wasn't nearly as well known as it is now. We're not nearly as many annual pass holders. But my parents'
Right.
attitude was, let's get these annual passes. We'll go frequently, maybe every week or two. Our kids will get their fill of Disneyland, and that'll be it. We'll never have to go again.
Right.
Well, I was friend of the show, Tony Baxter, Disney legend, retired Imagineer.
Mhm.
He was, he has a theory, the importance of being 12, and that's about how old I was back then. And I got bitten by the Disneyland bug. Wanted to know the history of the place, wanted to know why things were the way they were there. And I just totally became fascinated with the history. Um, and my parents renewed every year, and we would go maybe about once a week, sometimes more often. And I remember the Disney Gallery opened above Pirates of the Caribbean, and they started selling Disneyland: The Inside Story in there, which is a magnificent book about the history of Disneyland. And they also had artwork up there that was kind of from the history of Disneyland. So that helped feed my fascination. Um, and so, I became a big fan of Disneyland and theme parks in general, themed entertainment. And then in 1990, I started working there. Well, I was still in high school. It was actually the summer before my senior year, I believe, and I picked up a job in custodial. And by that time, I knew I wanted to be an Imagineer, basically.
Mhm.
Um, and so I thought I will learn how the park operates because that'll help. Plus I really should get a job, and where else would I rather work? So yeah, Disneyland. I didn't specifically seek out custodial. They put me in there, but I'm glad they did put me in custodial. And yeah, uh, worked there uh, for many years, and I'll let Lynn come in and talk a little bit.
So somewhat of a similar story. I went as a child maybe once a year. We grew up not very far from there, maybe 20 miles. Took maybe like yeah, about maybe like half an hour or so to get there. But we go maybe once a year, and then because it was so cheap then, we would go like for my birthday. Would get to invite a friend or two, and I think then it was like $25 a person or something. Makes us sound really old, huh? Wow, 25. Parking's not even more than that. But yeah, and then when I became a teenager, I think I was junior in high school, I got a annual pass there, and we hung out at Videopolis and stuff like that. But then, I was in marching band, and we got to play there several times, and we'd go as the band and get to play around the park after you're done performing. And um, then we would go, let's see what happened. So then when I graduated, probably like a year later, I started working there at Plaza Inn, busing. And that was kind of the start of my Disney career, but there was a little gap in between before I went to custodial, which didn't start till 1998. But I worked at Plaza Inn from 91 to 93. I was kind of like well, for first part of it, I was seasonal, and then they kept adding me in. So I think I was technically a seasonal, but I kept getting called in throughout the year. So because when you're seasonal, they would ask you to return everything in, and kind of you'd have to get a new locker every season.
Yeah.
Like, but they told me don't do that because we're gonna need you, more often, and we'll work on a status change or something. I don't remember how it all worked then, but so I had my same locker and everything, but sometimes it would go like I'd go maybe a month without working, and then all of a sudden I'd get called in. But and then summer I'd work, 5, 6 days a week. But I did that for 2 years, and then I left, was told to leave, um, because I was young and dumb and made some bad choices.
You were beating up the guests, weren't you?
Yeah.
That was it.
No, I was into music a lot then, and I was in a band, and we were doing all this stuff, and I just put that as a priority. So work was not, and they would keep scheduling me on a Friday or Saturday night, and so what would I do? Not go to work. So, anyways, that happened, and then I did a whole bunch of little jobs in between that, and came back in 1998 after I was in a band, and we just got off a pretty big tour. We were gone for like 6 weeks, and then um, that band ended, and so I thought I need to get a job, and I thought I'll go back to Disneyland. And next thing you know, I handed my application, and they say, um, "You're on no rehire status." And I said, "Oh, I forgot about that. I didn't think that would matter, you know."
Uh-huh.
So so they said, "But if you explain, maybe why we should hire you back in, then we'll look it over and we'll give you a call." I said, "Oh, great." So they're not going to call me. So I wrote on there, I just, I was young and dumb, and now I'm ready to work and be committed and blah blah blah. And so they did call me. They called me about a day later and asked me to come back down for an interview, and I did, and I got hired in custodial. They said your punishment is custodial.
There you go. Got it. That's what you do when you screw up, right? That's the old
Yeah,
that's the old tale that, oh, so
that's
do
right.
you start here and work your way up and
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, I would have been in attractions, right?
yeah.
No. Um, so I think we both kind of ended at our beginnings in custodial. Um, you kind of told up to that point, but we, you had worked there for 8 years before we had met. So that's a while. That's a while.
Yeah. Um well, I worked there all over the place, in custodial at Disneyland side because DCA didn't exist yet. Um and what in the summers the schedule would be more stable. We would pick a summer line, it was called, you know, set days off, set start time and end time,
Hmm.
which might actually I mean, you could pick a shift that would give you variations because you'd be filling in for somebody else, or whatever. So you might start earlier depending on the day, but I wanted stability. And I worked every summer with Harry Hemhauser, who at the time was the longest tenured, I don't know, longest tenured custodial employee or largest, hourly, but the longest, at least for day custodial. Um, and I worked for him every summer. And then, those were, I would get, my first summer I had kind of a mid shift. It was like 11 to 7:30.
Hmm.
But every summer after that, I would have like an opening shift, like, 8 or 9 or something like that. And until the summer of 96, where I had been assigned, I basically was working the Indiana Jones shift. There were two of us at a time during the day, and there were two at night that were in there sweeping the line, dumping the trash cans, checking the restrooms that are there near the station, which
Hmm.
guests can use if they're in a pinch, but it's really meant for cast members. Um, and they were desperate for foremen, for leads, because of some shenanigans. So a bunch of people had lost their radio, so they were desperate enough to make me a lead.
Wow.
But based on lead seniority, that meant I would be doing closing shifts most of the time for a while.
Yep.
So that was during the summer of 96. And so I became a lead after that and quickly started just getting lead shifts all the time. But, I was back to being a closing lead or closing shifts,
Hmm.
shifts like, 4 or 5 to 1:30, 5 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. Um, yeah. So that was interesting. Um, eventually though, in 2000, I picked up another job, and that became my main job. And I thought I was going to have to just quit Disneyland outright.
Mm-hmm.
But this other job had a 4-day schedule on Monday through Thursday, 10-hour days. And so now what happened was their supervisors and schedulers said, "Hey, you can still work here. You can work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and any like Monday holidays or any whatever holidays there would be, you'd be off from your other job. You could still work here." And I was like, okay. I hadn't counted on that, so that was nice because that was like extra money. Plus, I liked the perks of being a cast member.
Oh yeah.
And I was still I still wanted to be an Imagineer. I'd actually, that's funny that I mentioned the summer of 96 before. In the spring of 96, I had interned for what at the time was the largest independent theme park design firm in the world. I interned there, didn't get hired because I was terrible. No, I don't, I think it's because they weren't hiring. But I also was finishing up my classes in college. And so anyway, so there was a lot of change back then, but so still didn't land a job. So 2000 comes around. It's like, I've got to find a job that gets me more money and broadens my experiences, So I picked up another job, but I was able to still work at Disneyland on the weekends. And they knew they counted, like, Mary Cobb would be one of our managers. And if she needed to cut hours because attendance was down for the day or whatever, she knew I would ER. She wouldn't even ask. She would just tell me, "Oh, okay, you're leaving today at 11 or whatever," in the middle of the day. Because I just cared about still being a cast member. I wasn't desperate for the hours. And, often they'd cut my hours and I'd just hang out or whatever, but I was working day shifts again because, that was in line with my other job. And so I said, I can't work closing shifts if I've got this other job, because I got to get up. So they accommodated me really well for about 5 years. And, yes, I was working about 7 days a week for 5 years. If I wanted a day off, I had to really put in, weeks in advance and say, I need this day off for this, or I would call in sick. They did have to schedule me 5 shifts or whatever during spring break, 2 weeks of spring break and 2 weeks of the Christmas week, the winter holidays. But they knew I was going to call in sick because they knew I wasn't going to, miss my other job to come work at Disneyland, So I kept my attendance good enough because we were on a point system, and I kept my attendance good enough that I could do that. I could have 2 I'd call in sick back to back, 2 weeks in a row. I'd show up for my other shifts, the shifts that didn't conflict with my job. So they knew they would schedule me like closing undistributed shifts. They have these shifts called undistributed so that when you come in, you were sent to fill a vacancy because for someone else being out sick or whatever. And they just knew I wasn't going to show up. So, and that worked for 5 years. And then finally it was like, we need everybody to work full time in the summer. This was going to be the golden anniversary, the summer of 2005. And so I reluctantly had to leave, and I was looking for other jobs in the company, filling out applications, all that sort of thing. Had some interviews over the years. Some of them might have been before I left and some were after I left, and didn't get them. Now I've got, over 24 years of continuous experience at my other job. Not the same exact job. I've taken a couple of promotions over the years and been moved around, but same overall organization. And so never did become an Imagineer.
Not yet.
But there's still time, I guess. But my love of theme parks and Disneyland history, I I also really like animation and stuff like that, special effects and things like. I mean, I like special effects back before everything was digital, um, but that all has informed me, along with our experiences working there, for doing this podcast and for writing our books.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the undistributed shifts they would give you, because there was one time, I think you hadn't called in sick yet, but I had an opening shift like in Esplanade or something else, and for some reason they had you as opening restroom lead. And I thought, that's weird. Why would they put Ken at rest? He never goes on, you don't usually like to work on restrooms. And they had you as, I think maybe they had moved you from undistributed or something. It was a day shift that was weird. And
Huh.
then I looked, and then Greg, Greg, oh, what's his last name?
Which
In the
one?
off Greg, not
Oh,
Coven,
Greg King.
King. Yeah,
Yeah.
Greg, he had said, yeah, do you want to go to restrooms instead of Esplanade? You get more money. And I said, oh yeah. I said, sure, yeah, I'd do that. So he said, yeah, I don't think Ken's coming. He hasn't called in, but I don't think he's coming in. And then you had called like 10 minutes later. I was sitting in the conference room, and then, all right, Lynn, he called, you're on.
Yeah, I would usually try to call in as early as I could.
But it was a little bit, it was probably, I think, because Esplanade comes on at 5, and I think that I think it was right around that time, 5:30, and you weren't opening, you were like the east, like the second
Yeah.
restroom lead. So yeah.
Yeah, they would pay the restrooms would get a small extra amount,
Mhm.
and the restroom lead would also get a small extra amount. So sometimes people would say if they're trying to make a little bit extra, they would like want that shift for months on end, or whatever. I didn't
Yeah.
really care about getting that little extra. Um,
But
you
it
know,
added up, especially if you had a lead shift as in restrooms, then did it did kind of add up more. If Because in the beginning I was kind of getting half lead, half regular shifts. And so when I had a lead shift, then I was like, ooh, that was a big jump for me from a regular to lead shift. But anyways, yeah, I started, like I said, in 98 in custodial, and then became a lead in 2000. And that was before DCA, but had had opened, because I remember working with some of the guys that had eventually went over there. Um, but then when California Venture was getting ready to open, that's when our seniority changed. And I started getting, because at that point I was only getting lead shifts maybe on the weekends, and they were closing shifts. And I had 2 summers in a row closing Adventureland. And I think it was 2000 and then 2001 summer. I don't know, something like that. Yeah. And then I started getting opening shifts after that. And you know what? Now I look back at it, most of the good memories I have were some of the closing shifts that I had. I don't know. There's something about, even as a guest going to Disneyland at night, there's something special about being there at night. And I think that also goes for working there. I mean, sometimes it was kind of a bummer. You get off at, 1:30, and by the time I
yeah,
get home, it'd be 2 o'clock.
right.
Um, you know.
Yeah, practically speaking, it could be nice because you could take care of some errands
hmm
before your shift,
Yeah, appointments and things.
during the week or whatever. Often we would, if we were working full time, we would often have like a couple of weekdays off, or depending
Yeah.
on the time of year, it would sometimes it would be 7 days a week, 6 days a week, or whatever. But yeah, no, what I know, totally know what you mean. I would work in those closing shifts. I think I started setting my alarm for like 9 a.m. most days, because I said, if I just sleep, I
Yeah.
don't want to sleep. I don't want to like sleep so much and then have to turn right around and go back for my shift.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I should get more sleep than that. But I was young enough where it was like, no, I'm going to set my alarm for 9. I'm going to get up because I got things to do. And yeah, because if your shift, if it was like a 5 o'clock shift, or four, might be 4 o'clock or whatever. We get overtime a lot as leads,
Yeah.
because it just made sense to have like an opening lead and a closing lead, and sometimes to cover that you needed extra hours for them rather than have a third person that bridges that. um so I would just you think about it, like if you're starting at 4, I'd
Mhm.
have to start getting ready, got to shave.
Like
Didn't,
two.
when I started, men weren't allowed facial hair. The women, yes, no, but the men were not allowed facial hair when I started. Even then, when they were, it was like you could have a mustache, but you
That
can't
was
really.
it. Yeah.
So it was like, all right, I got to shave and shower and all that, and then get dressed, drive to Casper parking, wherever it was at the time, and then go in, get in, change into my costume, because I'd never adopted the, what do they call that? Fast track. I never adopted that.
Yeah.
The wear your costume home or take it home or whatever. Because when I started, you get fired if you got caught taking a costume piece out. Well,
Right.
back in my day, we weren't allowed to do that. They would
Yeah.
kick you right out and fire you and send you to Siberia. Yeah, so it just eats up a lot of time. If you got to start getting ready at like 2, or you know,
Yeah, it was 2 hours before my shift. I would have to get in the shower and, get ready and everything. So, and then I would have to leave. That takes 30 minutes. And then I would have to leave an hour and a half early because you never knew, especially if you'd started, like you said, at 4 or 5, how's the traffic going to be at,
yeah, that's the other
3
factor, is you
o'clock?
got to give
So,
yourself
yeah.
time because of the traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now going home's not a problem, but,
No.
um, see, with the early shift, sometimes like a 9 to 5:30, you're kind of dealing with traffic on both ends. But um, yeah,
Yeah.
but those closing shifts, once you're there, like you said, so it sometimes would take, I don't know, sometimes 45 minutes to an hour to get there. And then you have 30 minutes to get on the shuttle, get to change into your clothes, and get to the office in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So I always made, I mean, most of the time, like 98% of the time, I always made it because I like to leave myself enough extra time. But um, sometimes you wouldn't, you couldn't help it. But
You mentioned no traffic. Hold
yeah.
your thought. I think if you have a thought, you mentioned no
Yeah.
traffic at 1:30. I would go. Uh, I got it. Sometimes I decided that was going to be when I was going to do my grocery shopping,
Oh,
because the supermarket was open 24 hours, and I'm like, I don't have to deal with a lot of other people.
yeah. Yeah.
Just I would just have to deal with boxes cluttering the aisles. So it would be like I'd go straight from Disneyland to do my grocery shopping, and then go home.
Mm,
So
good.
yeah.
Smart. Yeah. Yes, I've really looked back at those closing shifts and just really enjoyed those. A lot of nights, especially during the week when I during the week when you were working there with me, you weren't working, but I would get those closing shifts like, and the park would close at 8 o'clock a lot of the time during the year, except
Mhm.
for like spring break, Christmas, and that was basically it. It wasn't all this extra, things that they had. Maybe a special event here and there, but most of the time the park would close at 8 o'clock. And
Yeah.
so the shift would be 1 to 9:30. And from about 1 to oh maybe 5, I wouldn't be a lead. Um I think I get paid lead. I can't remember, I wasn't. I just kind of roam around and just talk to the current lead that was there, and then when he would go home, or sometimes some of the leads would go, here, you're in charge now, and they'd go disappear. But the day leads, yeah, that open, but yeah, our shift would be 1 to 9:30, and you remember that we get to clean out the pirate boats or the logs that
Yeah.
splash. And those are always kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Anytime anytime the park would close before midnight, we were responsible for the by we, I mean the day custodial, not overnight graveyard third shift night custodial. The day custodial would be responsible for pirate boats and Splash Mountain logs.
If you worked
If you were overworking that area, yeah.
Yeah, like was it Frontier Adventureland for pirate boats
For pirate
and
boats, yeah.
New Orleans Critter Country for the
It was funny because pirates the coverage of pirates was divided and kind of shifted over the years.
Yeah.
Between there was the New Orleans Critter Country foreman and there was the Adventureland Frontierland foreman. And who was responsible for what at pirates kind of shifted over the years, because the line had to be swept, the trash cans in the inside and the trash cans in the outside had to be dumped, and boats had to be cleaned if there was a some sort of issue there.
Yeah.
And I think most of the time I was there, the boats were the New Orleans Critter Country lead's responsibility. Either they could do it themselves or they could send somebody, to go, and that usually meant riding around on a trip to get the boat clean, because it wasn't pulled off. It was just they said, we're not going to put guests in this boat because somebody threw up in there, so we're going to we would go in there and clean it up. And but it was just kind of split the responsibilities between the adventure and the New Orleans. Now, so New Orleans had the boats for during the day, but at night, it was closing time. It was like Adventure's responsibility to go clean the boats out. So that was kind of an interesting dichotomy. The New Orleans Critter Country that also had the splash logs, to do in terms of during the day. Like if there was a log that needed to be cleaned out, they would pull those off to the side. So that was easier to handle.
Yeah, when we say clean the boats, the main thing was to get the trash out of the boats. There are a lot of maps and things would sit because those boats would I don't think they would leak as much as the fact that splash water over 12 hours or more.
Yeah.
Going into the boat would accumulate by the end of the night, and sometimes we'd have big puddles in the bottom of them. Then we'd have to suck that water out, and the maps and every trash and napkins would get all soggy in the bottom and everything. And and then the lead was in charge of, once those boats were clear of us out of them and we got everything done, then we'd tell the cast member that would be up in the control station, we'd say clear, and then they'd push the button and the next one would come in, and we do over and over. Wouldn't we tie a pro towel to the first one so we knew?
Yeah, we'd tie it up at the front so that we knew where to stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes we forget to do that, and then we'd have to like, wait a minute, I think we did this one. It looks good.
Yeah. But to do that, I mean, you kind of had to make sure the rest of your area was good.
Or you'd leave someone, or you'd leave someone out of boats.
You would have somebody out checking. Yeah. Yeah, that was I mean, gosh, by the way, shameless plug time. We wrote 2 books about our time in Disneyland custodial, and so a lot of this kind of stuff we cover in the books. Those are the books you hear us mention at the opening of the show. We say, look, we've authors of 2 books called Cleaning the Kingdom. So yeah, though, if you've never bought them, we didn't write them to get rich. We don't, you don't make money doing that, writing nonfiction books, unless you were a president or something. You're not going to make any money. Or you're writing a school textbook that thousands of schools use. So yeah, when we talk about our books, that's what the books are chock full of that information. Our memoirs of working. The first one is really our memoir, the 2 of us, and then the second one is more other people's stories. But yeah, so if you haven't checked them out, you really should. Shameless plug. Um, Paperback, Kindle, audiobook, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, we did.
explains who we are and how we got there and why
Yeah.
we do that. I mean, it kind of not directly, but it kind of explains why we do this podcast, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. You'd said that we didn't write them to get rich, but for some reason we did. No, we didn't.
yeah,
Um,
we're living in the life of luxury here.
look at this studio, Ken.
This spread, this, I mean, goodness sakes, these
Exactly.
shrimp cocktail over here and this filet mignon and
That's
my
right.
goodness, these, look at these wines over here. You've got, it's the envy of any wine collector.
Yeah, yeah. Let's get this cleaned up over here. All right, thank you. Um, um, yeah. So, so we worked there. We could go on and on about our stories working there and some of the fun stuff. And like you mentioned, a lot of that's in our books. Not all of it, but what we could remember was in our in our books.
Yeah.
There's every now and then we'll talk
What
to a
doesn't
guest or
incriminate us too much?
right. But every now and then we'll have a guest on that maybe we worked with, and I'll go, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." You know, it'll kind of spark up some
Yeah.
memories that maybe we didn't think of when we were writing the books. But um, so
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Are you trying to wrap this up? I mean,
No.
oh, okay. I was
What
going
I'm
to say,
trying to do is move into
go ahead.
because you and I had become friends during. So when I started in '98, you were lead and I wasn't, but I think we kind of, would talk now and then when I'd work with you. But when
Yeah.
we really became friends was when I became the lead, because then we would have roll call in the morning and our night, and then we'd have lunches and things, and we'd kind of meet up and chat, or what, even just walking out to our lockers, our areas, we would just chat a little bit in the morning. But that's when we became really good friends. And then you left me, and in 2005, and I stayed about 2 years more. I just couldn't take it any longer without you there. So, uh, no, so during that time, yeah, I stayed till 2007, and then moved to Utah where I am now. But during that time, after I had left, you and I still had talked, and we were
Yeah.
still friends. But I'd started this podcast in 2011, early 2011, and
Wow.
so not so that was what, like 4 years later after I had left Disney, and so we it was still fresh in my mind, and I kind of miss going to Disneyland. Even up to that point, between 2007 and 11, um, I would still go to Disneyland, but maybe like once a year,
Yeah.
maybe twice. But my son was still very young at that time, so I think we would only go like once.
Well,
And
Disneyland's no place for children. I mean,
no, yeah, it was kind of
um,
hard taking a kid there. No, but no, we would only go maybe once or twice a year. We live 6 hours away drive, but anyways, I started the podcast and you were my first choice, but the contract, you did not agree to the contract. And so I had to have you as a
had to talk to my
part-time.
agent. Yeah.
Yeah, it did not work out. So, but no, and I worked, we worked with many people, and we kind of got to know who was into the history and really
Yeah.
appreciated Disneyland for what it is, more than just a workplace or a fun place to be with your friends, which is fine. But that's not, um, you know, Ken and I were different. And so when Ken couldn't commit to the podcast, I said, well, we'll have you on as a guest now and then. And so I thought
Yeah.
of who could I have. And I remembered Laura was a lead, and she and I would talk about stuff and point out things, history and stuff. So I asked her, and so we did the show up until about episode 100, I believe. Um,
Hmm.
but you are on there in between that. I would say you probably came on at least 10 times in that time period of those. I don't
Yeah.
know
It's
how many.
frequent guest, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know how many years that was. I think it was like
Special guest
3 years.
star. Um, yeah, that was fun being a guest.
It's
No, I'm
still
glad you brought I'm glad you brought that up. We used to work in neighboring area, like you would have
Yeah.
New Orleans Critter, and I would have Adventure Frontier, or vice
Yeah.
versa. So we would basically have the same start, and go to roll call, and we would go to lunch, or whatever. Um, yeah, that was great because neighboring. Well, first of all, leads would help each other out anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm covering something over here. Can you handle that call? It's not too far from your area. You know, but being buddies was good. And then staying in contact and all that. And you're right. I mean, both of us being interested in kind of the history of everything, and attending certain events like the Sherman
Oh
Brothers
yeah.
presentation and book signing. And
That was great.
I mean, that was because there's people who work there who just really couldn't care less.
Yeah.
It's their job. It's just their job. They might be, they might provide great guest service,
Oh yeah.
but because they don't want the guests to have a bad time, but they just really couldn't care less, and it's just a job, and that's it. But you have people like us who were just into the whole history of it all, and like to make magic. And I was still hoping to work for the company in a quote unquote professional capacity. By that I mean creative. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would you know I would collect the Disneyland line every week. It was the customer newsletter, and
Yeah.
I'd
Same
always get
here.
probably a couple copies of that because I knew someday somebody's going to want the extra copy. Um, and I was a collector, and when I did quit, I bought an annual pass, and
Oh, that's right.
resumed my time as an annual pass holder. Even though I probably could have pestered people to sign me in. I wanted me and my family. I was living in Anaheim, and actually I've lived in Anaheim my entire post Disneyland uh, time.
You lived closer to Disneyland when you weren't working there than when you were.
Yeah. So, but so it was convenient for me and my kids when they aged up and needed a pass, to have
Yeah.
passes and go and stuff like that. So, yeah,
It's
I've just been biding my time, waiting to get my hands on your Disney book collection.
yeah, so that is quite the collection. That started before I even worked there. I was interested in Disney history, so I was actually one of the first books I bought. I was working there at the time. It was the Window on Main Street book. It was when the bookstore was across the street, part of the Emporium.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
did. They carried a bunch of books over there.
Yeah, I remember that. That was one of the first books I started getting in, like reading behind the scenes, kind of hearing, reading about it. And then, of course, David Koenig's books came out, and I started reading more about that. And that was after I had worked there. But yeah, those kind of sparked my interest as far as getting to know who were the people behind some of the rides and how a lot of it worked and all that. But that kind of sparked my interest into wanting to do a pod or to find what podcasts were because I didn't even really know what they were. And I think I had tried to listen to a few and I don't know, that's not for me. But then I found a Disneyland one that was called Wedway Radio, and that was with Nate Parrish and Matt Parrish. But the started listening to them a lot, and they're really into the history, like they really appreciate it, and I think they put on a real good show. So I kind of got to know them just asking them questions and things. And then um, Nate had helped me set up the podcast onto the server that we had at the time. And just up into a week or so ago. But um, yeah, so that kind of got my interest going. And then, like I said, we had Laura on for a while, and then you came on. And then I think it was when you joined full time was that we had more time to talk when we weren't recording, but we were chatting.
Mhm.
Um, and that's when I think you had brought up about the book, and I think you'd first joked about it, like, "Hey, we should do a book." But I was thinking, yeah, that would be cool. And then we kind of just started putting stuff together, and you had already kind of had some written out already that you had
Yeah.
done articles for Laughing
Yep.
Place, I believe.
Yep.
And yeah, so then it just kind of started falling together, and we started coming up with topics and chapter ideas and things, and
And I was like, I'm thinking, do we really have enough for a book here? And then,
wow, yeah,
and then when we put it all together, it was, ended up being over 400 pages.
yeah, like 460 pages. We had enough for two just in that first book, but
Yeah, but we didn't want to skimp,
yeah.
we didn't want to,
Well, we thought it would be our only book. At that time we thought, we'll get a
well,
book out.
it's the closest we'll ever get to giving birth, is putting together that book. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's the podcast. I see. I've been involved in online communications uh, regarding Disney stuff. I'll give you an idea. My first modem was, I think, a 1200 baud modem.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm old. But when I first started, there was like, gosh, there was a bulletin board service. This is before everybody had access to the internet, right? It was you would dial up with your phone. You had a modem that would use your phone line to dial in, and there was a thing called Mouse Ears BBS bulletin boards. BBS is a bulletin board service, and it's actually, if you can find a copy of Mickey is 60 magazine from 1988,
Mm-hmm.
it mentions Mouse House in there, or
Oh,
excuse me, Mouse Ears. Mouse House was another one that came about. But there were these bulletin board services back in the day before the internet, and some of them at the time you could only one person could call into it at a time. So you'd call in, you'd read the forums, you would leave your messages if you wanted, and then you would hang up and somebody else could get through. And but
oh, that's
so
funny.
I've been involved in, and then of course came the Usenet and these internet forums where it would just be, it's all text and everything. Um, so yeah, so the early days of Mouse Ears, there's one called Mickey's Kingdom, one called Mouse House. I know the people who ran Mickey's Kingdom and Mouse House. I know I'm still connected with them on Facebook. Um, but then of course you had the internet, which everything expanded like crazy. This is before podcasts. I remember when Laughing Place started, and I encouraged Doobie to add discussion forums to that. This is before Facebook, before Facebook had a million Disney groups and all that sort of thing. But you know, so I've been
Wow.
involved in online communications for a long time. Podcasting is kind of the successor to that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I started the podcast, my goal was to talk, because we did history segments, like one episode was the history of, say, Space Mountain, but my goal was to talk about every attraction that ever existed in Disneyland, current and past and current uh attractions. And so I think up to this point, I think we're pretty close. I think there's about, well, there's been new attractions added since, but if not counting like Galaxy's Edge or any of the other new one in Toontown, the and just Disneyland Park, I think we only have a couple, like three or four left. So, and they're all the hard ones, like the Disneyland Railroad and Pirates of the Caribbean. So,
Yeah.
and Utopia, I think, is another one. But anyway, so that was the goal. But then when we started progressing and getting to know more people, and then one guest leads to another guest and another, and in social media, you meet people. Then we started having more and more guests, which has been a lot of fun. Talking
Yeah.
to former cast members, authors, other podcasters. We met Jim Corcus, and I had listened to no, not Wed Weaver. WDW Radio with Lou Mangello. I listened to that podcast. I wasn't as much into Disney World, but I did appreciate the history of it and learned a lot about Disney World from that podcast. But he every now and then would talk about Disneyland, but they had a guy there named Jim Corcus, and I thought this guy is really interesting. He'd go on forever about these things, the history of these attractions and or time periods or whatever. And he just seemed like a lot of fun. So I kind of found a way to reach out to him. And yeah, we were able to have Jim on along for a lot of episodes. And so that helped too with getting to know more guests like Jim and others. We've had repeated, Imagineers on. We think I've had Bob Gurr on our show 4 times. The first time we had him on, we did like a 3-part series with Bob Gurr. And then, so if you want to go back and hear those, I don't remember the name when they were, but they were in somewhere in the first 100. And then, then when you came on full time, we had Bob Gurr on again. And I think the time that we recorded that one was the day that Tony Baxter got his window dedicated at Disneyland.
That was quite a day because I went
Yeah.
to the window dedication,
Mhm.
and then we had some festivities after that, and then we all went to dinner. And the night was continuing, but Corey and I, my wife and I bowed out.
Yeah.
Because I had to get home to record with with
Mhm.
Bob Gurr, and I thought, what a life.
Yeah.
Sorry, I gotta stop hanging out with one Disney legend and go interview another one.
Right.
And I'm like, this is great. This is wonderful. I never, who knew? Little did I know way back in the day that, be doing this. So.
Yeah, isn't it? It's been, and we had Rolly Crump in those
Raleigh,
first
yes.
50, 100 episodes, I think. And we've had a lot of Disney legends on. We've had a lot of, you know, Imagineers on, former Imagineers. So it's just been amazing over the years to have all these people. You can go back and find all these episodes. At one point I had an idea and I still have the idea, but it takes a lot of work unless someone wants to do this for me. But
Yeah.
maybe I'll give you some free books or something. But
Lynn puts a lot of work into this. So.
this idea, and if someone wants to do this, reach out to me. But I wanted to put all the podcasts in categories. So like Jim Corcus podcasts, the series, so number, episode 50, 72, I don't know. And then put like former Imagineers, and put all the different interviews there. And so that way we have like an index on our website of so if you wanted to listen to a show by a former cast member, you can go to that list and listen to something, or you wanted to listen to some of the Jim Corcus episodes, you can find all those. So anyways, that's my idea to do that. And I started it, but it's a lot of work. You have to go through this whole list of, to this point, even counting the not the bonus, the mini episodes and then the
Yeah.
current event episodes, which we don't number. You have to go through like 450 episodes to
Yeah.
get this all figured out. So that's eventually that will happen unless someone wants to step up and help. That would be great. And so anyways, yeah, we've just been really blessed to have so many people on and it's just grown and grown and it's something that Ken and I enjoy doing every time. I've done other podcasts and been guests and did a podcast with concierge, and as much as those are fun to do, nothing beats the time when Ken and I get to sit down and talk to someone or talk amongst ourselves. That's always a favorite time of the month where we do these. So it's just been a lot of fun, and we have no intentions of stopping anytime soon, but we need to
We're
finish up those episodes, those history ones I keep talking about. So
we're trying to. We're not only no intention of stopping. We're trying to. We're actively trying to reach out and expand in terms of getting more listeners.
yeah.
You've taken steps for that. Changing where our archive is, and we're trying to reach out to more people because when people do hear the podcast, they talk about some of the things they like about it a lot. The topics we cover, the insights we have, because as custodial people, we went everywhere. We saw how the park functioned. We went everywhere that we could, behind the scenes and as well as on stage. And we got some insights into how the park works and what's successful and what might be challenging and all that sort of thing. And so people like listening to this, and I'm humbled by that. And
oh yeah,
if more people find out about us and give us a try, more people might
and
listen regularly.
and the goal isn't necessarily to have more listeners for ourselves. I think a lot about, because I think if I enjoy this, listening to these guests or our discussion topic, I'm pretty sure there's others out there that would enjoy it, that have the same interests in
Yeah.
Disneyland and stuff. And a lot of times there's a lot of great podcasts out there, but there's a lot that don't do what we're doing, and I just want as many people to hear these stories, because especially the cast member stories, you can't get those anywhere else. I mean, you could hear some of these same guests on another podcast, but you're not going to hear the same questions that we would ask. And I just I find it very special, and these are people's lives, and they've invested in working at Disneyland, and we're bringing these stories back up. And so a lot of these people, it's the only time they will ever do a podcast is when we talk to them, and
Yeah.
they just get so excited. They a lot of times we'll get done recording. Everyone's heard us do these interviews, but after we get done, they're a lot of times they're very thankful, and sometimes they're a little apprehensive when I ask them, like,
Right.
okay, I guess. But then after it's over, they're like, wow, thank you. That was so much fun. You brought up a lot of fun memories. So that's what we're trying to do here mainly, is to preserve these stories for future people. And yeah, and I think as long as these podcasts are in this sort of form, I think they'll be around. And I try to save all these. I have backups of them, and so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. They're the people we'll talk with, I mean, range from, somebody worked in a store there. I mean, just think about the variety of people we talk with. They've worked
decorating.
stores, or they were they worked in guest relations, or they ended up being an ambassador,
Yeah,
or of course they worked in Imagineering, or they
musicians. We've had
risk
musicians.
management for the company,
Yeah.
for the corporation. Risk management.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the musicians, really, it's a wide variety, because we're trying to get as many different perspectives as possible.
Hmm.
And often we'll ask this. Well, sometimes we'll pose the same questions to different people. Were you there? You were there these years. Were you there for like the Rick D's Halloween party in 1984?
Right.
Because I want to get different perspectives, even if I know the gist of what happened for that event. I want to get somebody else's perspective on it. you know
Yeah, because not everyone was in the exact same place. I mean, you and I worked at the same time period, but we weren't in the exact same areas. So we
right.
have different stories. So yeah, it's been really good. And um yeah, so if there's a topic that you want us to discuss that we haven't yet, I've had a couple of people reach out. Someone reached out, and they wanted to hear more about the Tomorrowland 98 refurbishment, and we did talk about that. So if you have something you'd like us to talk about, we will definitely do that, because we're running out of topics. No, because
We
we
need
want to.
ideas. No.
No, we're trying to. I have a lot, but I'm trying to I'm trying to please the listeners, because that's what it's about, right? So thank you so much for putting up with this last hour of us just going on and on about the good old days, but they really were, and they still are good days as we continue to record this podcast. Okay. What a
Oh,
great what a great guest we had again.
yeah,
Ken.
I could listen to those guys forever. I could listen to them go on and on and on. But seriously, thank you for still listening. We always have things to say here at the outro. the conclusion of the episode. We are trying to reach more people, and the ads that are running are going to cover expenses, hopefully. And you want the ad-free versions, do the Patreon thing. But yeah, thank you so much. And if you like the way we were talking, and you're not yet a Patreon supporter, consider becoming one, because you'll get those bonus episodes that do kind of sound a little like that.
For sure. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and we'll have to do that periodically again. And if you'd like to leave a review, this is where we usually leave or read the reviews of our show. So if you listen on Apple Podcasts, which is the one I use, I usually just read from that. It seems to be the most popular one that gets downloaded. Until there's another way to read, because I tried to look on Spotify, I don't see where you can leave a review. So if someone knows how that's done, let me know, but I haven't been able to see that. But for now, we just read Apple reviews, and we don't have a new one yet. So that means that we need you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. We really appreciate it. And check out our website. We always have our show notes, and we have links to our books, and we have shirts on there you can buy, and a whole bunch of things you can check out on our website. You can join our Patreon there. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk with you next time.